Welcome everybody to the Distorian's Lounge. Of course, we are missing our co-host Kirk for Wolver's Carp tonight, but you get to have a few solo stories with me, Kate the Disney Cicerone. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys and get to share some fake things that used to be real in Disneyland. So that is our topic for this evening, and I'm really excited to chat with you guys about this tonight. So I have, let me count. I didn't even count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So tonight we have 5 stories of fake things that used to be real in Disneyland. And that's what we're going to share with y'all. And we're going to start out with some wooden posts in Frontierland. Now, I have to say, I was at Disneyland recently and I was like, security's going to legit like come after me. They're probably watching me the whole time because I'm the weirdo that's like, I was videotaping chains and posts. And I was tapping on lampposts. I was so weird. So, yeah. So anyway, so this is all about the wooden posts in Frontierland. And I'm going to say the target practice gallery. So if you, just because some words are not acceptable on TikTok. So Target Practice Gallery, if you can imagine what that is, that's the name I'm going to use for it, even though that's not the official name, and we all know that. I was casing Disneyland. Erin, I wasn't, I promise. Oh, goodness. The wooden posts that are outside of the Target Practice Gallery in Disneyland have been there since the very beginning. I was looking up, I was like, when did these first get installed? But used to look a little bit different. So I'll give you a little picture if you're not familiar with Disneyland about what it looks like. Well, this is kind of an older picture of it, but if you're used to it, you can see these posts that have like a V at the top and then a post running through the middle. And these are some really unique looking posts. And most of you are probably like, I've literally never paid attention to that. And that's okay. Because who is, except for me? I'm a weirdo, but maybe you will next time you go to Disneyland because it's a really cool feature. So back when Disneyland first opened, this wasn't the Target Practice Gallery. This was actually a miniature horse corral. Here's kind of a further out picture, and then I have some ones that are closer. But you can see right to the side of that kind of lookout, there's this miniature horse one. And you can also see, everybody says Disneyland's castle is so small, but you can see how it really wasn't small back then because the landscaping was so much smaller. And so the castle, the idea was you could see the castle as an anchor point from anywhere where you are in the park. And that was true for quite some time until the trees got a little bit more mature and then you couldn't see it anymore. So there's the miniature horse corral, and you can also see these wooden posts pretty clearly here. So the story behind these posts was that there was a businessman who was in Montana who collected all of them as kind of a hobby. There's like, Raleigh Crumb called these petrified posts, but I don't think they were actually petrified wood. I think that might have been a mistake that he called it that because of what happened, which you'll see. But anyway, this gentleman was a collector of these like really unique wooden posts that had all this like gnarled wood on it. And he gave them to Walt Disney because he thought that they would go well in Disneyland. And Walt Disney agreed that they would look pretty great. So they put them in front of the miniature horse corral, and later it became the Target Practice Gallery. But about after 20 years or so, in the 1970s, the wood was starting to rot. And so what they did was they took these posts out and they made fiberglass replicas of them that had the same kind of look and feel. And then they put the fiberglass ones back in. So that's why I think they're probably not petrified, because I don't think petrified wood rots. Look at this post. Isn't it neat? Yeah, right? I think it's neat. I don't know. But so those posts are not actual real wood posts. And I do have a few more pictures of them close up. I always love these kind of vintage photos because they're always family photos, but I can use them for reference. But you can see this is what the real wooden ones looked like with this very happy family chilling in there. And gosh, There's so many. This one you can see, this is Black Bart and the sheriff, who used to be characters that walked around in Frontierland, but you can also see the post behind them. There was 2 rows of posts at this point, but you can see this is what they look like now, and they're definitely fiberglass. But, you know, they look kind of like wood too, from first glance. Did you think that my fence was complete? You guys are so great. I'm never going to be able to look at those posts without singing that song in my head now. So thanks for that. Yeah, so these are the first thing that is wooden, but not wooden. So fake, but used to be real. This is one of our first stories. And here's another good picture of what it used to look like back in the day. You can see they're definitely more real wood back then. So let's talk a little bit about the Carousel horses. So we're going to hop on over to Fantasyland, and we're going to talk about the King Arthur Carousel with 2 R's. The Carousel was originally the Denzel model carousel from Sunnyside Beach Park in Toronto, Ontario, from 1922. There's a lot of rumors out there that this was actually from 1875, but I've never seen anything that actually confirms that date. So there's a potential that it's older than 1922, but I don't have evidence for it, so I don't know for sure if that's true. It was moved to Disneyland in 1954, and then it was refurbished quite a bit. So originally it had 3 courses of horses, and then they added a 4th row to it. So courses are just like those rows of horses on the carousel. So they added more horses, essentially. I think there was 72 to begin with, and then they ended up with 90, and now there's a little bit less. They do have a Mary Poppins horse that's called Jingles, but all the horses have names in Disneyland. Only 2 in Disney World have names, but Disneyland horses all have names, and I actually have them. So let's talk about the horses' names, and then I'll talk about where the horses came from. So this is going to be a big, long list, so brace yourself. This is alphabetical order. Here are all the names of the horses for the carousel in Disneyland. Alma, Arabian Night, Avanti, Baby, Belle, Bruce, Centurion, Checkers Jr., Champion, Chodus, Cinch, Copper, Crown, Jewel, Crusader, Dagger, Daisy, Dante, Duke, Eagle Scout, Eleanor, Elroy, Emerald, Fern, Flourish, Frenchie, Galaxy, Gypsy, Hal, Ivy, Jester, Jingles, Kaleidoscope, King Richard, Lance, Leo, Leprechaun, Lucifer's Rose, Lunatic, National Velvet, Patches, Pegasus, Penny, Queenie, Rally, Red Devil, Renaissance, Sapphire, Saxon, Screaming Eagle, Seabiscuit, Sir Lancelot, Sir Patrick, Steamer, Tartan Tassel, Testy Pat, Thistle, Tiny, Topaz, Tulip, Turbo, Eunice, and Valence. So those are all of the names of the carousel horses for Disneyland's carousel. Yeah, Lunatic, I know. Like, some of them, I'm like, I want to know the names, why they chose these names for the carousel horses. So that is definitely something that I'm going to be doing research on, because I just want to figure it out. I haven't tried to get a list of names from the horses from City Hall in a while, but I do know that you used to be able to do that. So if anybody wants to try it and go to Disneyland and ask at City Hall for the names of the carousel horses, they used to be able to give you a list. So I haven't tried to do it in quite a few years, and a lot of things have changed in the park. So I don't know if you can still do that. I should make a challenge and ride all of the horses and keep track of them. I should do that. Allie Beth, I think I'm going to do that, because that sounds like a lot of fun. I usually aim for Checkers is one of my favorites. So Checkers or Jingles, between the 2. Now let me show you a few pictures of these horses so you know what we're talking about. This one is Jingles, which you guys were mentioning. This is kind of not a great photo of Jingles, but you can see the Mary Poppins umbrella back there and the little hidden Mickey and the bells down the side. There's also Mary Poppins shoes, and there's a little Julie Andrews, so J.A. So it's Julie Andrews, and when Disneyland turned for its 50th anniversary, when it turned 50 years old, they dedicated this horse to Julie Andrews and Mary Poppins. And so she became the ambassador with Jingles. And then this is also known as Walt's favorite carousel horse. And it is the lead carousel horse, which is named Jingles. Kind of. And I actually have a picture. So let's talk about where these horses came from, because I have a really interesting picture of Jingles for you guys. So this was, of course, moved in 1954, Disneyland, and they refurbished it. They added a whole bunch of horses. So some of the horses came from other places. They're a mix from Sunnyside, which is Sunnyside Beach Park in Toronto, Ontario, Ward's Kittyland from Coney Island, and Loof and Denzel horses from Playland in San Francisco. So it's kind of a mix of horses from all these different places. And they had them converted to jumpers. So if you don't know what that means, it's the horses that go up and down. So all the horses on the carousel go up and down. But that was not how they originally were. Some of the horses on the original Sunnyside carousel were just standing, and some of them were not horses at all. They were like animals. That's why they had to get, not only for that fourth row, but they had to like replace a whole bunch of animals that were not horses. So they had tigers, and I actually have a picture of it here. Let me see. I don't know if I have a picture of Sunnyside one, but I do have pictures from, I think this one. This is one of the other ones. You can see there's a tiger there. I feel like this might be, I think this is the Sunnyside one. This serves me right because I didn't label them. But you can see that there's a bunch of different animals besides horses there. And here's a great picture of some gentlemen standing next to said tiger. So when they had to rebuild a lot of the base of this, like for the carousel. This is what this looked like when Disneyland was being constructed. You can see kind of the skeleton of the carousel. And it originally was 12 feet closer to the castle than it is now. And then this one is one of my favorite ones. So they fixed a lot of the feet of the horses. So if they weren't jumpers, they made them to jumpers, but they maintained the original wood as much as humanly possible for the main body and head of these horses. So this one, you can actually see them physically painting the horses, and there's Jingles on the side. Now, the horses were not all white to begin with. They were a mix of black and white horses. But some of the horses were, because all of the kids always ran to the white horses because those were like what the heroes rode, right? They're called hero horses. They didn't want to ride the villain horses back then. So in the 1970s, they repainted all of the horses on the carousel to be white so that every child could ride a hero horse, and they would stop having kids not want to ride because there were no white horses left. But you can see how some of them in this colored photo, you can see the black horse on the side there. And this one's also yellow. So it wasn't just necessarily black and white horses. There was also some different colors in there as well. Could totally ride a villain horse. Me too, Maria. I would too. I think it's fun. I think today, people would really be into riding hero horses and villain horses alike. Another thing they did was they removed the wooden chariots from them, and they repurposed the woodwork for Casey Jr. train. So if you've ever seen Casey Jr. circus train, and you see, and I feel like that's probably fiberglass too by now. They wash that so often with pressure washing and whatnot. I would be really, really, really surprised if it was not fiberglass replica. But you can see some of the woodwork that was originally on the carousel is now on the Casey Jr. train there. So they removed the wooden chariots and they put them in Casey Jr. for the Calliope tenders. And they also had the Wurlitzer, I feel like it's 157. Some people have said 155, but there's an organ that was used as a decoration, but it did actually play music until 1983 renovation, and then they just replaced it with speakers at that point. So the organ that you see on the carousel did actually play music for quite some time in Disneyland until that 1983 renovation. So we've arrived. What has made these horses, they were fake, but they used to be real? Well, most of them still are. Most of them are still wooden horses that you can go and they're the same horses from all these carousels that we talked about. And they've just repainted them and refurbished them. But sometimes they do have fiberglass replacements. And what this is true about Disney World as well. What happens is they usually take like a whole row of horses and they'll take it off at a time. And they have backup replicas of all these horses, and they'll put those replicas on the carousel while they're refurbishing those set of horses. And they just kind of go around and refurbish all of them. So throughout the year, they get a good once over, because guests are really hard on these horses, and they're super old, right? 1922 at least. So they're very, very old horses, and they want to make sure that they maintain them well. So they remove them, they put up fiberglass ones, but you wouldn't be able to tell from the outside. The only way you can tell that they're fiberglass is if you tap on them and they sound hollow. So if you are on your horse, give it a little pat, a gentle one, because they're old, and you can tell if they are real or fake at the time that you sit on them. And also the horses have like A through E. They have A through E horses. So the ones that are on the outside of the carousel are the more elaborate horses. And then the ones that, as you get in closer to the carousel, they're a little bit smaller and a little less elaborate. And that is always been the case with carousels throughout history. They put kind of the more dramatic decorated horses on the outside to make the carousel look really pretty. And they save a little bit of cost of labor and whatnot, and they put everything else just a little bit toned down as you get closer into the center of the carousel. Usually they're just smaller in Disneyland as you get in closer to the center. So a difference between Disneyland and Magic Kingdom carousel? Yes. The one in Magic Kingdom is quite a bit larger. It's the largest carousel in North America. It's also technically older, depending on the date of this carousel. It's from 1917. It's called the Liberty Carousel. So if you look in Disney World's carousel, you will see a whole bunch of, they kept a lot of the original theme from it. So it's very patriotic carousel. Even though it's supposed to be Prince Charming's carousel, you'll see a lot of stars and eagles, and it's very red, white, blue theme. They kept a lot of that original theming to honor the history of the carousel. And only 2 of the horses are named on that one. And what else about that? But they do the same process of taking the whole row of those horses off at a time, and they have fiberglass replicas of those as well. Yeah, the eagles again, right? They're everywhere. There's eagles everywhere. So usually the Bellamy Eagle, I don't know if it's the Bellamy Eagle on Prince Charming Carousel. I'd have to look, but I know there is an eagle there. So that is stories 1 and 2 of our fake things that were once real in Disneyland. We did the wooden post in Frontierland, and we did the carousel horses, which you should knock on to see if yours is real or a fiberglass replica. And now we're going to talk about the something that is no longer there, but used to be there in the Magic Kingdom. I need a book of Disney Eagles now instead of Mickey's. I'm going to work on it. I'll make one. I'll make something. We'll figure it out. How could they have been real horses? They were never real horses. There were, though, miniature horses over in Frontierland, which we just saw a few minutes ago. Why don't we talk about this thing in Magic Kingdom that used to be there but is not there anymore? And this would be the Chapeau Hatbox sign. I don't know how many of you remember the Chapeau hat store. The store looked like this, and it's now been converted more into that candy confectionery area. It's kind of like an expansion of the confectionery. But this is the Chapeau area. And the hat box that we were talking about used to hang on the side where that green building is. And I do have a photo of it for you because it's important to show you what it looks like. So this says the Chapeau, has number 63, and it's a little pink hat box with a teal bow and some white or maybe light pink and darker pink stripes. And this is used to hang in front of the Chapeau. So this is, it has a really interesting backstory to it. If you guys remember, this area on Main Street, USA in the Magic Kingdom has a lot of ties to Lady and the Tramp. So if you guys probably all know about in the concrete, it's actually resilient asphalt. On the sidewalk, there are little paw prints for Lady and the Tramp and a little heart, and it's super cute. If you don't see that, it's probably under some strollers because they like to park strollers there. But this hat box has a little story. So one Christmas, Walt Disney surprised his wife Lillian with a puppy that was hidden in a hat box with a huge ribbon. So when Lillian saw the hat box, she was mad because she didn't like Walt's taste in hats. I've done a whole post about this, about their kind of like rivalry about hats. And she didn't like she didn't like his hat. She didn't like the way he wore his hats because he wore it kind of like an angle, and he was like a little sassy and whatnot. And so she would grab his hat and like chuck it away from him as a joke, like she didn't like it. And so I will just say that story. One time they were in Mexico because they were researching Three Caballeros, and among other things. And he was going to they were celebrating because they were watching a bullfight, and the bullfighter won. And one of the traditions is to grab your hat and throw it into the ring. So she grabbed his hat, which was like one of his favorite hats that she despised, and went to go chuck it into the ring. And he grabbed it just in time and saved it. Well, later he had that hat the brim shaped into like a heart, and he bronzed it. And then for her birthday, which was the day after Valentine's Day, it was February 15th, he put a bunch of violets in it and gave it to her like it was a vase. And she laughed when she realized it was his hat that she absolutely hated. And he gave it to her for her birthday. And that very same hat is in the Walt Disney Family Museum if you want to go see it. It's kind of near the end of the exhibit with Walt's kind of personal effects, but it's pretty funny story. So they had this thing about hats. So she sees this hat box and she's like, I don't want a hat that you picked out. But then it was a joke. So it was a joke between them, and she opened it up and it was actually a puppy, which she didn't want. So this is something that Walt told. He told the story to his animators when he went back to work at Disney Studios, and they used that story then for Lady and the Tramp. So if you're familiar with the movie at all, Lady and the Tramp, Jim Deere gives Darling a hat box for Christmas, and inside is a little puppy that they then name Lady. So it looks a little bit like this. You can see it is a pink hat box with white and pink stripes. So that hat box sign that we see hanging outside of Chapeau is a little nod to the Lady and the Tramp storyline. Now, you might be wondering where the 63 came from. The 63 is actually a nod to the storyline of the shop itself, which was originally based on the Disney film Summer Magic, and that came out in 1963. Supposedly, the shop was run by two of the characters from Summer Magic, so that is the story of the fake thing that was once real but not. So this hat box was a real hat box, a real situation, but then it became a fake one in multiple ways. And this, unfortunately, it's not there anymore. I wish you guys could go see it because it's such a fun thing. I was like, I couldn't remember if they replaced it or not, so I sent Lem from Magic Bags and Trash Cans. I asked Kirk too, but Lem got there first. I was like, could you just go see if this is here anymore? And he's like, nope, it's gone. I'm like, oh man. So I'm so grateful to have friends that are regular park goers that are able to help me out when I need it. So let's talk about the next one, which is the Hitching posts. Some of you might have already seen my post about this recently, so bear with me if you have. But if you haven't, let's just chat about it a little bit more. So the hitching post, if you don't know what hitching post is, it's essentially somewhere to tie up your horse, right? It's not something that is very common these days because we don't use horses as our main source of transportation. But way back in the day when everybody took their horse everywhere, outside of every establishment, there was a hitching post where you would tie your horse up while you went in the shop and did whatever you needed to do, and then come back out and your horse is still there instead of wandering off, right? So every business was usually responsible for taking care of the hitching post that was in front of their business. And in the Old West, it was a little bit more hodgepodgey. Sometimes they would just have like a big bar, like a wooden pole that they would have that you could just tie up there, or a railing. Sometimes that would be. But when you got a little bit more fancy in, Victorian era, everything got fancier in Victorian era. So they would have these hitching posts that were a little bit fancier. And so you can see this is one from Disneyland that is a white hitching post. They do have some black ones and some green ones, depending on where you're at. And these are duplicated in Disney World from the Disneyland mold. But where did they come from to begin with? So that's the story itself. So not only is this part of the scene setting of the town, but there is a story behind these hitching posts. And that starts with Emile Curie, who is the interior designer for much of Disneyland. He did Club 33, what is now 20 Run Royal, what was going to be an apartment up there. He did Walt Disney's apartment that's over the firehouse. He did elements of the Plaza Inn, alongside like Dorothea Redmond also worked with him there too. So, but he also found the flagpole that he got for $5 for Disneyland. That was like a light pole that someone ran into with their car, and then he saw it and he was like, "Oh, they're not going to use that light pole anymore." So he ran up and was like, "Can I buy that for you?" And the cops were like, "We have to take it to this place, but here's the place you can go to and ask." And so he did. He went and he ended up getting it for $5, which is a steal. So there's the flagpole, and then the other thing he got was the light post, which we'll talk about in a little while. But the hitching posts were also something he came up with. So Emile Curie was an art director on all kinds of films. He did Topper, Spellbound, Mary Poppins, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, It's a Wonderful Life, and a movie called The Heiress, where he won an Oscar in 1949. He also joined Disney Studios in 1952 and won an Oscar for his work on the film 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But we're going to go back to 1949 because that's where he filmed The Heiress. And this was filmed in an authentic 1840s mansion that was in New York. The owner, he did like such a good job taking care of the house while he was set designing it that the owner was extremely pleased with what he was doing. And he decided to gift him the original hitching post from the property. So I went and I looked this up because I was like, what did the hitching post look like in New York in like 1840-ish? Because that's when this house was from. And they looked a little bit like this. I found this horse head hitching post that was from New York in the same time period. Obviously, it needs a little TLC, but this was in an auction house for like $2,200 or something like that. But you can see very, very, very similar to our Disneyland hitching posts. So because they didn't need hitching posts anymore by the time they were filming that in 1949, I imagine they were just removed, and so the owner had it and then gifted it to him. So Emile Curie took this hitching post and he put it outside of his home for a long, long time. And then 5 years later, when he was set designing Disneyland, he thought this was the perfect time period for these hitching posts. So he took that hitching post that he had been gifted and he made a mold of it. And then he made all these hitching posts from that mold for Disneyland. So if you go today, you can see the same hitching post that he saw, that he was gifted in 1949. So these are I actually did have this confirmed by someone who paints these in the parks, which was so kind. He reached out, I think on Instagram, but he confirmed that when they repaint these, they strip down all of the layers so that all the layers of paint, so they don't lose any of the incredible details on these horses. And that's just part of their like SOP, is they make sure that they don't lose all the little details of like the hair in the mane of the horse, and it has a bridle and it has kind of like a decorative wreath or something that's hanging around it. So they make sure that they don't lose those details by just like slapping on layers of paint, right? Well, so they use these, the same mold they used for Disney World. So these horses also exist in Disney World. However, I don't think they have the same rules there because they definitely have less definition. I'm trying to look into seeing if I can get any information about what their SOP is for Disney World and maybe why it's different. And I just find that it's true that Disney World just tends to have different standards for some things. That's pretty typical. They're operated by different management teams. But that horse, I mean, you can still see it when you go to Disney World, is the same kind of hitching post that Emil Curie got from just basically being really kind on his job site and doing his job really well, and was a gift. So it could be the Disney World is bigger, so it's harder to maintain. That's a possibility. But there's a lot more details and a lot more attractions in Disneyland. So I don't know if that's, I mean, Disney World as a whole is bigger, but Disneyland has more in it than Disney World, Magic Kingdom, if that makes sense. So that is something that used to be a real hitching post that is now something that's fake in Disneyland and Disney World. And I do have this really wonderful quote from Emil Curie, who said, this is just a quote about him working with Walt and how he felt about him. And I just thought it was really fun to share with you guys. So he said, working with Walt Disney was like working in another world. He was the most fascinating and dedicated person I know. Although Walt was a perfectionist, he was sentimental too. I can remember when we would view the dailies of The Parent Trap, I'd glance at Walt and there would be tears running down his cheeks. Of course, I cried along with him. I'm sentimental too. So, yeah, I just love that quote. It just gives a little insight into who Walt was from, how other people saw him from their interactions with him. So, bye, Leila. Thanks for hanging out. So I think then that lends us into our last story of fake things at Disney that used to be real. And that is something I mentioned that Emil Curie picked up, which was the lampposts. And a lot of you have probably heard stories about this before. I feel like this is a Disney history fact that's just kind of like been around, but there's pieces to it that most people don't know. So in the 1950s, when Disneyland was built in 1955, and they were constructed in 1954 because it took a year to make Disneyland, there's a bunch of cities across America that were replacing their gas lamps. And so if you are not familiar with lighting history, before we had electrical lights, we had gas lamps, we had gas lights. And every evening, the lamp lighter would walk around to each of the gas lamps and get a ladder and climb up to the lamp, and would then light each gas lamp so that the streets could be illuminated. But in the 1950s, 60s, they were really outdated by that point. They were like 160 years old, and they're like, these need to go. They're not as safe. If a car runs into them, it's pretty dangerous. So they're like, let's replace these with electric lights. That was the plan. So they were replacing all of these gas lamps with electric lights. And that just was so fortuitous timing for Disneyland, because they needed lights that were of that same time period of around the turn of the century. They needed gas lamps. So Emil Curie made a trip to Baltimore, and in 1955 to purchase, at a cost of 8 cents per pound, a whole bunch of these gas lamps. And that's about $40 a piece. So that is a steal for an antique gas lamp that was 160 years old. They also got a whole bunch from St. Louis and Philadelphia. And I'll show you some pictures in just a minute, but the St. Louis ones you can still see, especially if you walk in the very front of Disneyland. Look at the ones that are in that front area before you go into the crossfade and go into the first scene of Main Street USA. You can see in that area where there's like the big Mickey Studio logo, you can see on the sides those lamps have St. Louis on the bottom. And a few on Main Street say Banner Ironworks, which was also located in St. Louis. So there's a few St. Louis lamps in there, and then some Philadelphia ones as well. Philadelphia ones I haven't been able to identify specifically. I'm still looking for that. And I saw one that said LA. So there might be also one that they got locally. But the gas lamps were definitely from all these different places. And Emil Curie said they were the only lampposts I could find that would match the less than full-scale design of Main Street USA. So if you remember, Main Street USA is meant to be pony-sized. It's a little bit smaller at Disneyland than it is at Disney World, because Disney World has a larger castle, so they had to scale it up a little bit. So Disneyland is a 5/8 scale. Disney World is a 7/8 scale. Don't gaslight us. I'll see what I can do, Kevin, to not gaslight you. So these lamps in Disneyland, they put them in, and then the ones in Disney World are also just replicas of the Disneyland ones. But I'll show you some of the pictures of where they got them from because they're going to look really familiar. So this one is from Baltimore, and you can see lamp stacks are lit. Yeah, so the ones in Florida are all fiberglass replicas. So only the original ones were in Disneyland. And I have ones also from, these are St. Louis. So you can kind of see them in the background behind the bus there. You can see that lamp in St. Louis, gas lamps. They're all very similar, like crowns around the top of the lamps. Then you can see this is what it looks like in Disneyland in the 1950s. This is outside the Wonderland music shop. But same lamps. This is likely one of those. Repurposing them was a bright idea. Oh my goodness. The dad jokes. I love it. This one I love. It's kind of on the side of this, but you can see it. There's an ad for the Columbia sailing ship because it was new at this point. But you can see a little close-up of the gas lamp there. Truly enlightening. You guys are the best. So they did make a fiberglass replica for Disney World. So I have one from Disney World opening day. And this is with Julie Andrews. She was the one that helped open the park. So you can see her there next to, there's old hitching posts too. Back when the hitching post was white. And you can see it there. But the Disney World ones were electric from the beginning. They've never had gas in it that I have ever seen. Because this is from opening day and there's very clearly a light bulb in there. So Disney World never had the actual gas lamps, whereas Disneyland does have gas lamps that are lit all day. I don't know if I have this one. I don't know if I have a picture of it actually lit up. But yeah, her dress was beautiful for that. If you've not seen Disney World's opening day, it's worth a watch because it's really interesting. This is kind of like a bendy photo of it. I think it was taken with a little fisheye. That you can see this is Disney World's with the little light inside. So something that's really interesting for Disneyland is they used to have a tradition of an actual gas lamp lighter. I want to say gas lighter. And I said that in my post by accident that I made. It's like they had gas lighters that came and did, like lit all the lamps. I'm like, wait a minute. That's not the right terminology. And by the time I realized it was done, I was like, I can't. I'm like, I'm going to just be, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I was like, I'm just going to let it go. So I did call them gas lighters, but they're gas lamp lighters that would actually come and light them at twilight in Disneyland for the first few years in Disneyland, which I think that would have been so wonderful to have that ambiance continue. I can understand it's a lot of work, though, and manpower to have to do that rather than having them automatically just like flip a switch and light up. So we don't have the gas lighters anymore, but that was a tradition in Disneyland. So you might be asking yourself at this point, what is fake about them, right? So we're talking about fake things that were once real in Disneyland. Well, this is where it gets a little bit sad. So just brace yourself. I was actually really sad when I learned this one. This is a story from Raleigh Crump. Told this one. He said every night maintenance would come in and hose everything down to clean it, which we know, we've seen that Disney does that at night with some like pressure washing and whatnot. He said obviously after a while the lampposts would rust. We replaced those with fiberglass copies along with all the lampposts in New Orleans Square. Next time you're around there, give them a knock or two. You'd never know it was fiberglass unless you heard that distinctive sound. So I feel like everybody's like, these are the real ones that are like over 200 years old. And I'm like, well, it's possible that some of them are. It's more likely that they've replaced at least a few of them, if not most of them, with fiberglass replicas by this point. So me being the weirdo that I was, I'm like on Main Street USA, like tapping on all of the lampposts because I wanted to see, and I was not able to find one that felt like it was metal. Like they definitely have that fiberglass, like, metal has that more of a, even with layers of paint, has kind of that more of a tinny sound to it. And I wasn't able to find any. So if anybody thinks they find a real one on Main Street USA, please let me know because now I'm invested in this. Next trip, you're knocking all the horses and gas lamps. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, thanks, Christina. I wouldn't be me if I didn't know this. I don't know. I just love. I'm just a weirdo that's obsessed with Disney history, guys. That's all it is. Like, there's nothing special about me except that I read a lot, and I just seem to maintain I can retain a lot of the information. That's all. And I just love sharing it with you guys in a fun way. I started trend at Disney. Everybody's going to be knocking on the posts. Only the true Distorians, the true history nerds, will be knocking on all of the gas lamps at Disney. Oh, goodness. I think that was most of my notes for this evening. I do have a couple other things that I found that I'll just share with you guys that I forgot. I'm a Disney loving weirdo, but I'm your guys' weirdo. It's true. I love all of the crazy details that you can find in Disney history, and it never stops coming. And the problem is, though, I feel like if Kevin's still in here, he was the one that said to me one time that Disney people are storytellers. So sometimes it is hard to pick apart what is real and what is not. And I've gotten very cautious about where I get my facts from over the years, because I just want to make sure that we're telling an accurate story as much as humanly possible. And sometimes it's hard. I feel like the fountains, that fountain story about the forced perspective was out there for years. And it was this is what it is. This is the actual story about the Snow White fountain and the artist messing up the measurements. But it was found out that when they cleaned out John Hench's desk, they found a whole bunch of notes showing that he actually made the measurements wrong. So sometimes Disney history unfolds in layers, and you just kind of roll with it. It's just like all history, right? We just discover things as we go. So I do my best to try to give you guys as accurate information as possible and don't mess up, right? Mm-hmm. So something I did find as I was just kind of breezing through some of these historical documents, I did find a expenditure authorization from Disneyland from May 9th of 1955. And it says to cover the additional amount of $5,000 in authorizing the total amount of $20,000 for modification work being accomplished by Aero Development on the Carousel for Fantasyland. So it looks like they originally authorized them for an amount of $15,000, and they increased it by $5,000 to get the project done, which seems very on par for Disneyland, that everything costs way more than they thought. I feel like anybody who's ever done any contracting work on any project knows that just happens, right? But it's really interesting to see it kind of in historical context, to see how those prices just went up. And Aero Development also didn't overcharge them. They kind of undercharged them, and Walt Disney found out later that they'd undercharged them for all the amount of work they did, and Disney made up for it. He actually paid them a large sum later. And they said, no, it was just an honor to work with you. We were happy to get our start. And he was like, no. We're going to make this right. And he gave them extra money, which I really love. So yeah, Kevin, I don't know if it's a theory. I don't know if you know anything about the Bellamy Eagles. I'm trying to figure it out. That all the eagles that kind of are golden and they're looking to the side, and they're literally everywhere. They're on the Columbia, they're on Main Street, they're Liberty Square, but they're not just in the patriotic places. I found them everywhere. They're in Epcot, they're in Magic Kingdom, they're in Disneyland, and I don't know. If you ever know anything about them, let me know, because I'm at this point they just keep popping up, and I'm like, what is this? Probably just very cliche American. Yeah, could be. I don't know. I'm just taking pictures of them because I'm like, it's probably nothing, because Bellamy Eagles were just what they put over the thresholds of houses as decor along the lines of barrels equals theming. Yeah, it could be. And I'm just I want it to be something, but I'm not claiming it's anything, because it probably is just that. This is a national treasure. I want it's got to be Freemason, right? That's our default. Is it? If it's American and it's everywhere, it's got to be treasure hunt somehow. Maybe this is our final link to where Walt's frozen head or something. So we can compare. Let's just combine all the conspiracy theories together and just make it fun. Nothing is free at Disneyland, not even the Masons. Oh my goodness, I love it. It's been really fun to hang out with you all tonight at this unique Distorian's Lounge. Thank you for being with me to chat about all of the fake things that were once real in Disney, and I appreciate you guys. So have a great night. Bye, everybody.